All right, guys, so we're going to take a little bit of a look at the small intestine today. We're going to cover a little bit of some of the stuff for the rest of the alimentary canal, but specifically, we're going to focus in on the small intestine. Okay. All right, so basic divisions of the small intestine, you can see them here. So the small intestine starts directly from the bottom of the stomach, which is right at the pyloric sphincter, and then runs all the way to the large intestine, which would then be the ileocecal valve. So it's from that valve to that valve. There's a couple different sections here. There's the what's called duodenum or duodenum, however you want to kind of pronounce that. It's pronounced both ways. There's also then the jejunum, and then you have the ileum. So duodenum, jejunum, and ileum are the three sections. You've got this little bit of connective tissue that kind of holds those pieces in place called the mesentery. And really, all that is just connective tissue that keeps this digestive system or the small intestine from kind of twisting on itself. All right. Small intestine is the major digestive organ of the body because this is pretty much where all of the nutrient absorption takes place. It extends all the way from the pyloric sphincter to the ileocecal valve, and then it's held in place by this suspensory mesentery kind of to the abdominal wall. Three divisions just kind of talks a little bit more in general of kind of their anatomy. So duodenum is attached directly to the bottom of the stomach, just after the pyloric sphincter. It has a little bit of a curvature to it, and in that little curvature is another organ called your pancreas, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. Uh, and then really what's going on in here is the pancreas is secreting enzymes in there, as well as there's bile secreted by the liver that go into the duodenum. So there's a lot of sugar digestion here, as well as fat digestion that takes place in the duodenum. Jejunum then is next. So this is attached kind of directly anterior to the duodenum. All right, so the duodenum actually curves itself under the large intestine. You can kind of see it in this diagram here. And then the jejunum then sits in front of the large intestine, or kind of just directly below it. All right, the last section then is the ileum. So that's the jejunum to the large intestine. So really size-wise, the ileum is probably a little bit longer than the jejunum, but really the main thing here for the ileum is it goes from the jejunum directly to the ileocecal valve and into the large intestine. This little structure right down here at the bottom is actually your appendix. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through as well. Length of the alimentary canal in total. So you've got your mouth, which is about 3 inches, the esophagus, which is 10 inches. So now we're up to a total of 13 inches, or a little over a foot. Now we have the stomach added into there, which is another 6 inches. The small intestine, which is a total of 15 feet. That's why it's kind of called the major organ of the digestive system. And then your large intestine, which is comprised of about 4 feet. So all in total, it's about 282 or 228 inches, which equates to about 19 feet. So of the 19 feet, 15 feet of that is the small intestine. All right. Main propulsion in the small intestine is all done by peristalsis, as well as that other movements we kind of talked about, which are segmentation. So just that mixing back and forth of the different particles that are inside of the small intestine. So it's mixing of the food bolus, which is now chyme, as well as the digestive juices that came out of the stomach. And then it's just essentially trying to push this along and continue to absorb stuff until we get it to the large intestine. Inside of the small intestine, to aid with that absorption, are these little finger-like structures called villi. They're projections that stick out away from the mucosa lining, or the mucosal lining. And then really what their purpose is to give the small intestine more surface area, to allow it to absorb things faster because of that surface area. There are little structures within the small intestine called microvilli. So they're just little, each one of these little studs here is the villi. And then on top of those villi are these little microvilli. Again, they're just increasing surface area, and they are really there to help kind of absorb substances. Okay, nutrients involved in absorption structures involved in absorption of nutrients. So you've got these absorptive cells on the end of the little villi. You've got your capillary bed that sits just below that, right? And then you have these little specialized cells called lacteal cells, which are actually lymphatic capillaries. Those are kind of embedded in here as well, right? So that would be kind of this green structure that runs through there. All of this is kind of designed to try to absorb things and get it back into our system so we can use it. So in the small intestine, There are these little folds called circular folds or plica circulars. Okay, so these are just deep folds in both the mucosa as well as the submucosa. These little folds do not go away when you fill it with food. So it's not like a balloon when you fill it up and you lose those kind of wrinkles on the outside of the balloon. Those stay there pretty much the entire time. There is also some lymphatic tissue that is in here called the Peyer's patches. So those are specific areas that help us absorb some of this nutrients and food that are coming through the small intestine. Inside of the small intestine, we have several different kind of enzymes that work. So these enzymes are being produced by these brush borders. So these are the ends of the villi, so these microvilli, and they do a couple different things. So they're there to help both break down sugars as well as proteins. All right, so we're breaking down proteins and sugars really specifically here in the small intestine. And then the pancreatic enzymes play a major role in the function of digestion. They help completely digest and get rid of kind of starches. So there's a pancreatic enzyme called amylase. And then this is really where about half of our protein digestion takes place, and the enzyme in there is called trypsin. Other pancreatic enzymes that play a huge role. So we have the responsibility of fat digestion. So this is an enzyme called lipase. All right, we know it's an enzyme because it's ASE. All right, and then we are also digesting nucleic acid, so nuclease. All right, and then the last thing here is kind of the alkaline. So it's trying to neutralize that stomach acid that came out of the bottom portion of the stomach through the pyloric sphincter. All right, so it's really an alkaline environment to try to help neutralize that. So otherwise, we would continue to have that digestive enzymes passing through the small intestine. We probably have a little bit of a hole in there. Okay, chemical digestion in the small intestine. So we just talked about this. So we have the enzymes mixing with that. Those enzymes are coming from both the interstitial cells as well as the pancreas. All right, bile is going to enter through here through the gallbladder. So the gallbladder simply just stores bile for the liver, right, and then secretes it into the duodenum when we need it. So it's released into there when the duodenum senses that it has food in there. Choleosteokinase and secretin are another couple of hormones that are produced specifically by the pancreas and liver. All right, so these are produced by the mucosal cells, and they're specifically influenced when the pancreatic juices hit the duodenum. Okay, and those are really there to kind of help lower the pH. Sorry, not lower the pH, neutralize the pH. So we want to bring that pH back up closer to 7, and they are also there to kind of help start breaking food down. Okay. Other things that are kind of absorbed in the small intestine. So water is absorbed along the entire length of the small intestine. And then the end product of the digestive system here is to make sure that we've absorbed as much as we possibly can, and then deposit the rest of it into the large intestine. So we've got active absorption by the cell membrane within the small intestine, and then lipids are absorbed by simple diffusion, all right, because we can just simply pass them across because a high concentration to a low concentration from one to the other. The substances then are transported to the liver. So anything absorbed is going to be transported to the liver by this hepatic portal vein. All right. Actually, if I go back, we can kind of see that. So you can see everything's kind of transported. There's a vein system right in through here that's going to transport things back up to the liver. All right. Or it can also be picked up by the lymph that's in around there. So some of those Peyer's patches and other areas to kind of really get it through there. The main takeaway from this is that the small intestine does most of our absorption, both carbohydrates, proteins, and as well as lipids. When we get into the large intestine, you're going to notice that the large intestine really is only absorbing water. So water is absorbed here in the small intestine, but it's really its main purpose is to kind of get some of these carbohydrates, lipids, as well as proteins absorbed during this. Okay.